Hey guys, welcome back to Brian's Garage. Today we're going to remove another stuck wheel bearing, except today we're going to use a different method. We're going to use a bolt to pop the wheel bearing hub out of the knuckle assembly. First, place your vehicle on jack stands and remove the wheel. Take the wheel off, pop out the center hub, and then put the wheel right back on. Lower the vehicle back to the ground so the tire is just touching. Now with the center cap removed, use a large socket, whatever specified for your vehicle. You can rent a set of these at AutoZone. Mine's 34 millimeter. Use a breaker bar. Put on your axle nut and give it a good twist. Jack the vehicle back up off the ground again and secure with the jack stand. Take the axle nut almost all the way off. But leave it threaded just beyond the end of the axle shaft. Take the wheel off. With the spindle nut just past the end of the axle shaft, tap this nut. This one's loose already, but sometimes they get really stuck. That's why I say put this just past the end here. You want to leave the nut on. Don't hit the axle shaft directly because you can mushroom the tip of that. You'll never get a new nut back on there. Which reminds me, when you're done, make sure you purchase a new axle nut. They're about $6 at AutoZone. Get some blue thread locker because once you're done, you want to make sure this axle nut never comes off again while you're driving. Compress the brake caliper with a large C-clamp. Remove your brake caliper with the two bolts in the back. You may need a breaker bar to get started. These will be heavily torqued down. Spray the old wheel bearing down with PB Blaster. It will help to remove it. Spray both the inside and the outside where it meets the wheel knuckle. To remove your brake rotor, you may have a locking screw in place like this one. Mine's a T31 socket, so let's see if it comes out with that. It may get stuck. If it does, we're gonna have to grind it off. Yep, my T31 sheared off, so we're gonna have to grind this out. A small tool with a smaller wheel, like a dremel tool, will work better than an angle grinder. Or you could just drill it out. Okay, now remove your rotor. Now remove the 3 bolts that hold in the wheel bearing. You've got one here, one up on top, and one on the bottom on the other side. Typically there's 3. Okay, now the wheel bearing should come out, but you're going to bang on it, you're going to pry on it, and then you're going to find it's stuck. So we're going to cut right to the bolt method, and I'll show you how to get it out that way. All right, here's the key part. Head to your hardware store and get yourself a hardened bolt that is just slightly smaller in diameter than the studs on the wheel bearing. You can tell if you try to put a nut on there, it won't fit. It's just slightly smaller. Key is you want this bolt to be as big as it can be, but still slide through one of these stud holes. Okay, now we're going to take out one of these studs. You may need to cut it off with an angle grinder or a dremel tool or even a hacksaw in order to pop it through, but we're going to try to just tap this one straight through with a hammer right there. There it is. It's through. And there we have it. The stud is out. But if you can't get it out, you might need to cut it off with an angle grinder, or you could use a hacksaw or a dremel tool. Make sure you cut it as close to the wheel bearing as you can. That way we can get our bolt back in later to use the bolt extraction method. Do not press down the brake when you do this because the brake is disconnected. So we're going to turn it on. We're going to lightly tap the brake, I mean lightly, and then shift it back into neutral. That way we can turn the axle. Okay, now take a long screwdriver or a breaker bar and turn your axle so that the axle hole where the stud is popped out lines up with the flat part of your wheel knuckle. Okay, that should work right there really well. Do not use it on a sloped area like up here. It will pop off. So you want it square, good place where you can push the bolt up against, and you're gonna see how that's gonna pry this out. Okay, here's the really important part. We're gonna use this hardened bolt. I'm using another nut, just an oversized nut that it doesn't fit. You can use a stack of washers, that's fine too. Then use a washer for sure. And then use the hardened bolt nut that goes with the bolt. And screw that in, and you're going to see how this is going to start to work now. As it's screwed in, that bolt pushes through, and it's going to start to push the bearing away from the aluminum knuckle right here. We just need to put a wrench on both sides, a wrench on the washer or the nut right here, and then also on the head of the bolt. Okay, here we go. We're going to put the box wrench on right here on the nut. We're going to put another wrench on the head of the bolt, and we're going to start twisting them towards each other. And it's going to push that bolt right into that knuckle there, which is then going to push away the wheel bearing from that knuckle, and it's going to pop off. You'll hear it go crack. There it was. Did you hear that? That's the sound you want to hear. That means it's free. But what we need to do is rotate this now and do a couple different places on this wheel bearing so that it's equal coming out. This is going to come right out now. Okay, we're going to try it from one or two other angles now on the other side. Turn that up there. Okay, same process. Put the bolt in. I'm going to use my spacer nut, washer, and then the final hardened nut. Again, we're using a hardened bolt here, folks. If we don't use a hardened bolt, we're going to break it. So use a hardened bolt. Cost you a couple bucks, but it's well worth it. Okay, put a wrench on it and our socket. And we'll start cranking. Okay, and there it is. It's starting to get loose through here. You can even get a screwdriver into this gap now, so you can tell that it's coming along. Just keep working it. Okay, we're pretty close now. You may have seen this from my other video. I take a tow bar, slide this on over one of the studs, thread tighten in a stud or a nut, and then I take a big hammer or an axe. I give it a swing, and this should knock it loose. Okay, there we go. It's super loose now. There's lots of space in there. This is going to come right out. And here's what we've been waiting for. It's totally loose. It's out. That's it. Before you put the new wheel bearing back in, you want to make sure you prepare the wheel knuckle to clean this up. There's some usually corrosion in here. You can use a dremel tool or sander. Lightly do this. Don't do too much. Or you can even just use sandpaper. It'll just take a little bit longer time. Okay, we're all done with that. Again, very lightly sanding. We're not going to sand any of the aluminum down, just the corrosion we want to get off there. We're going to clean that up. So there we go. It's cleaned out. We're going to put a little dab of anti-seize on there too. Hopefully you'll never have to do this again, but if you ever do, you'll be really glad that you put some anti-seize on there too, just so that these pieces don't stick together again like they did today. Okay, and reassembly is the reverse of the disassembly. Put on our shield, slide the wheel bearing over the spindle, and into place. Add a drop of Loctite either to the bolt or right to the holes that comes through as it goes into the wheel bearing. Put our 3 bolts in the back of the wheel bearing. Tighten up the 3 bolts in the back. Put the brake rotor back on. We're going to put the brake bracket back on. First we're going to put a dab of Loctite on these bolts. brake pads back in, put on the brake caliper. Okay, take your new axle nut, put a little bit of thread locker on there. Some of these may actually have it already on there from the manufacturer, but that should do the job. Put it on there and give it a spin. Check your manufacturer suggested torque specifications for your axle nut. These will vary by vehicle manufacturer. Okay, put your wheel back on and you are good to go. Okay, that wraps it up. Remember, the trick to today's job is a hardened bolt. You can tell it's hardened if it has 6 lines on the end of it. You need to have this bolt to be just slightly smaller than the stud that you take out of the wheel bearing. And then have a stack of washers or an oversized nut to put in the middle. And then you're all set. If this helped you out today, please like my video. See you next time.